Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the third in the series of business support webinars from Westminster Business Council. This is Selling in a Crisis. My name is Sophie Shrubsole, one of the team here at WBC. We're going to wait just a minute or so to allow people to join the webinar. We've got close to 100 businesses joining us today, so just allowing a few minutes for people to join, but I can see quite a few coming in already. So hello, Thomas Maddox, hi to you. Stephen Walker, hi. Philippa Steele's on the line, hi Philippa. Les Bexfield of Cascade Group, good to see you joining us. Just a few housekeeping rules as we go through. Everyone is on mute at the moment, but as we go through the session, if you'd like to ask questions, please do use the Q&A functionality, and those questions will come through to me and I will be able to read those out to you and to Bob later on. Hello to Carl Rago, and those questions will be asked at the end of the session. See lots of people joining now, so hello and welcome. We've got lots of people joining, so thank you for joining us on time. Hope downloading GoToWebinar was easy for you. As I say, this is our third session, but do bear with us with the technology. If there's any questions or issues, please do use that Q&A functionality and I will try and help you as we go through. But I'm delighted that our presenter today is Bob Etherington. We've known Bob for a long time and he's always been fantastic in helping businesses with a variety of sales issues as a sales trainer, and helps people with presentation skills and speaking to large audiences. And indeed, Bob is an award-winning sales trainer. Bob shows organisations and individuals how to overcome key challenges across the whole field of business persuasion, and has authored 4 well-known books on selling for business people, which have been published in English, Mandarin, Vietnamese and Russian. Bob was originally trained by Xerox and before joining Reuters was also employed in sales management roles by Grand Metropolitan and Midland Bank. And he's a frequent conference speaker all over the world and was elected a Freeman of the City of London in 2008. So we've got a fantastic presenter with us today. I know he's going to give us lots of insights into how we can approach customers and engage with them during this really challenging time. But just waiting for a few more people to join us before I head over to Bob. I'll just give it another minute or so. I can still see that number is creeping up. So thank you everyone that's joining and for being with us today. I can see a few people have been with us on every single session, so I hope you're getting lots of information and value from these webinars. And indeed, if there are topics that you'd like us to cover, then please do drop us a note and we'll endeavour to find the best presenters to give you that information. Hello to Claire Collins from Buttercup, good to see you joining us. Lots more people logging in now. And we'll just give it another minute or so just to allow more people to join. But as I say, there's a lot of opportunity to give valuable information via these webinar series. So if there is something that as an organisation we can help you and your business with, then feel free to get in touch and let us know what it is that we can do to help you, either via these webinars or directly. We're here to help throughout this crisis and beyond, so please feel free to get in touch. Okay, I think we are about ready to start, but just before I hand over, do think of any questions that you might like to ask Bob to get some real value out of this and some key takeaways, and send those through to me through the Q&A functionality. I am going now to pass over to Bob, so I'm just going to click a couple of buttons and we'll be able to hear from him.
Show my screen. That's it. I'm rolling.
There you are. Fantastic. Thanks, Bob.
Thanks, Sue. Good afternoon, one and all. I'm Bob Etherington, and I help fix sales problems, not just sales, but negotiating, presentation, and everything else. I've been doing it for a very long time. I'm not saying I'm better than you. I've just been doing it for a lot longer. This is my fifth crisis since I started work in the late 60s. I keep on coming back into crisis mode. I'm not saying this crisis is like the last one, but it's just another upset. We've got to learn how to cope with it and sell. We have to learn to sell, all of us, because without selling for our businesses, nothing else happens and nothing else matters. Without sales, you don't get any orders. Without orders, you don't get any money. Without money, you don't have a business. So we have to learn how to do it. That's not to say that we are going to find it particularly easy for the next few months, but there are ways of getting around and doing it. My clients have included everybody up to the UK Supreme Court down to one-man bands. So I've had a pretty wide experience of these sort of things. I don't have all the answers, but let me share some of them with you today. Now, interestingly enough, just before Christmas, a colleague of mine in the coaching profession said that one of the chairmen of one of the high street banks wanted me to write a paper. She wouldn't say which one. Wanted me to write a paper on uncertainty, and this before all of this blew up. So I think it's a good way to segue into the next half an hour, 45 minutes or so, for you to hear what I said about uncertainty, which then resulted in running a program on dealing with uncertainty for the bank. Here we go. There is no certainty. No person on earth knows what is going to happen next. Not even the experts who are convinced they do know. Absolute uncertainty with each passing second is the only certainty. In 1984, a global experiment was set up led by UK academic Philip Tetlock from the International Research Council. The experiment asked 284 world-renowned successful leaders, academics, top CEOs, gurus, influencers, and military strategists a number of questions, each on a range of long-term topics, like, for example, what are the percentage chances of a social unrest in Russia? Will it get worse, stay the same, get better? Now, in total, the experts answered 27,450 questions. After 20 years, their predictions were analyzed against what had actually happened. The predicted outcomes were no better than those that would be obtained if you or I had picked numbers randomly from a hat. But further analysis showed that some people were better than others at predicting correctly, and those, counterintuitively, were the experts who had been least certain. But the human dilemma in this uncertain world is that we all crave certainty. In the famous Maslow's hierarchy of human needs pyramid, safety, certainty, and security are firmly there at the fundamental human survival foundation, only just above food, rest, and shelter. So any person, occupation, or supernatural force that seems to offer certainty or control amid all the chaos is eagerly sought and followed by nearly everyone on the planet. Shamans, astrologers, leaders, historical graphs, safe jobs, and laws are all man-made efforts to control uncertainty and make less risky decisions in the future. When asked 50 years ago what worried him about political forecasting, the one-time UK Prime Minister Harold Macmillan memorably replied, "Nothing whatsoever, dear boy, except events, dear boy, events." Now, you may say that in any uncertain situation, and that's your job, investment decision, marriage proposals, etc., your best options may be to ask a leader you trust, consult the stars, or even pray, all of which experience shows portend more random outcomes for you. But interestingly, when considering the world's most successful people over the past few hundred uncertain years, nearly all of them have made a huge number of mistakes, far more than the less successful majority of us all. They have been tricked, robbed, bankrupted, laughed at, made poorly adjudged decisions in hindsight, and failed completely in others. Richard Branson of Virgin Atlantic spent time in prison for VAT fraud. Peter Jones of Dragon's Den was bankrupt and forced to crash on friends' sofas. US baseball record holder Babe Ruth hit 714 home runs in his career, but he also struck out, I mean that by that failed, 1,330 times. Most business deals fail. Most companies eventually fail. Less than 0.5% of them survive for 100 years. Most military battle plans fail because the generals always base them on the last war. So ask whoever you like, you're going to make mistakes however hard you try not to. It's not to say that all successful people don't seek ideas from leaders, coaches, maybe even consult the stars or go to I Ching for guidance. But having absorbed the available information, they then calculate the risk, make their own decision, whatever it is, and do it. In times of uncertainty, the enemy to success is perfection. The secret of power is action. As my very first sales manager at Xerox used to say, there are no customers in the office. You have to go outside and get the danger of getting an order. If uncertainty is paralyzing you at the moment, there are 6 initial steps you can take immediately. It's called the dance model. Write down what it is you want, and that is D for your desired outcome. Write down 10 actions you could take to make it happen, and take one of those actions. N, notice what is happening over the next 10 days. If nothing's happened, then C, change the action. And overall else, model yourself on excellence, a hero or leader who has been there before you. To discover more about the methods and techniques you and your team can apply in order to thrive, prosper, and profit from uncertainty, just ask. When the pupil is ready, the teacher will appear. Now that's me. I'm sorry you can't see me today. My hair is a bit grayer than that. It was taken a few years ago now, but it's because of the lack of barbers around southeast London at the moment, it's quite bushy. The richest man, I used to live and work in New York City. The richest man there that I ever knew was a Chinese banker, and he had a sign on his desk. And you know, if you live or ever work with people in North America, the bosses tend to have like a Toblerone thing on their desk with their name on front of it, so you know who they are. But on the back of it, this man had written some words which he said made him very, very wealthy. And it's these I've written on the screen now. And he could only see it around his side of the Toblerone bar, where it said, maybe he's right. So when he was looking at you across the desk, rather than dismiss what you had to say, he'd say, maybe there's something in that. And that's all I'd ask for you this afternoon. If you would just say maybe is right and give me the benefit of the doubt, maybe we'll come up with some solutions that you can use. Selling in a crisis. Now the objectives of this webinar have got to be quite limited, because what I can't do is cover complex account selling, negotiation, presentation, leadership, and the all important thing if you're going to succeed in sales, that is attitude and the general sports psychology of getting things done. But maybe we can discuss that at some other time. Today, what I'm going to do is do 3 key things that you can use starting today or tomorrow to change your sales outcomes. Firstly, is what to do instead of the one thing that everybody does and nearly wrecks most sales. Even people have trained not to do it, and even myself, I get caught in this one and I have to carefully avoid it, but we're going to cover what that is in just a minute. The second thing is how to get caught in how to avoid getting caught in the thing that customers often say to you as they leave a meeting with you, great, that was fantastic, we'll let you know soon, and then you never hear from them again. That's what I call the great nowhere land. And in my experience, huge numbers of sales funnels are full of people saying, yeah, we're going to get it in a minute. What did he say when I left the office? He said, great, really is going to let us know soon. The awful truth is this is just somebody usually being polite and not somebody who's necessarily going to buy from you. But there's a way to get around it so that you stay in control of the situation. And thirdly, discover the secret of making an unpressurized cold call or a cold email that actually opens doors. And in my experience, that's a lot better than hanging around social media all day, hoping for some divine inspiration and somebody is going to say, wow, that's really good. It's not that social media doesn't have a place. I just prefer to be more proactive and pick up a phone sometimes and make a call to them. I'm going to show you how to do that. If you care to do it, then that's great. If you don't, then good luck with the method you've chosen. Selling in a crisis. What I'm hearing from people and experiencing, myself, because we're all the same thing, is that people are having all sorts of problems at the moment. These are your customer base. People tell me they're having nightmares, they have an overall lack of confidence, they feel vulnerable, The fear, worry, and concern stalk their lives every day. A lot of them are feeling a panic. A lot of my friends are selling their businesses and saying, that's enough of this for me. They're circling the wagons. They are sleepless at night, and they're really fed up. Now, this is nothing different from most of the recessions, from the difficult times for the last 40 or 50 years that I've been in business. There's only one big overriding thing underlying that: a careless, cureless, global, deadly, infectious disease. And that's frightening everybody more than anything else. So on top of everything that I've told you so far, you've got a marketplace which is very, very nervous of doing new things and changing its mind. However, people are going out and doing something. We've got to work out how we can provide you with the tools to handle that. Selling in a crisis. What do you think, looking at that market, that most people are feeling powerless, mentally fragile, and highly emotional? What do you think they are asking from people like you and me? Now, I'm going to now and again ask you to do a bit of writing down just for your own notes. So what things do you think, just write 2 or 3 things down, that in that very, very fragile marketplace, what are your customers looking for? Doesn't matter what you're selling, from you. And I'll give you a minute just to have a think about that. Well, I kind of count backwards to 30. Well, we'll give you half a minute to write these down. I'm still here. But let's have a look quickly now. I know it wasn't quite half a minute, but I just want to press on to make sure I cover everything. This is me, a little picture of me. Whenever I want you to write something down, I might put a picture of me up on the screen. But one of the things that I keep hearing in the last 3 or 4 weeks around London, where I've done most of my work, is your customers crave from you, and mine crave from me, feeling of safety. They don't want to be shouted at. They don't want to be pitched at. They don't want to be talked at or talked into anything. They just want to feel safe. And they want to have confidence. And the third thing that somebody added yesterday, they want understanding. They want to be pitched at. They want people to come in and listen to them. And I can only sympathize with this. A couple of weeks ago, I had to go to the doctor because I got bronchitis. And I wanted to tell the doctor all about the problem that I had and how I was feeling and everything else. And I wanted him to listen, instead of which he was so busy. Within a couple of minutes, he was saying, yeah, thank you for telling me all that. You've got bronchitis. And I felt totally underwhelmed by his approach. I could see why he did it, but he wanted to tell me what the solution was. I wanted him to listen to my problem. And you're going to find this more and more with your clients now. They want to tell you, they want to ask you, they expect to be listened to at length. Even if what they've got to say to you, you disagree with, listen to them. You're not there just to interrupt them and jump in and say, we have got a solution for that. But first of all, before we get into what I am going to show you to do, let's look at I want to look at the 4 suicidal crisis sales strategies, which I can see as I go around the marketplace, people are trying to adopt again, and they're going to prove, if you do them, just as suicidal as they have done in the past. It's not going to be possible, I'm sure, for you to dismiss all of these things, but I'd like you to try. The first thing is wait and see. This is a strategy being adopted by a lot of people at the moment who are waiting for the good times to come back. That if they hang around for long enough, then that everything will turn out all right. They're calling it the new normal, but actually what they mean is the normal. And I have to say that I don't think things are going to be as they were before. And wait and see, you might well find that the light at the end of the tunnel isn't a light at the end of the tunnel. It's an express train coming the other way. So wait and see isn't a good strategy. As I said to you before, most army generals fail because they plan for the last war. This is this war. This is what we've got to get through. Second thing I'd like you to try and avoid is this feeling that it's really all about price. Just for a few seconds now, just write down on your pad around the desk or wherever you're sitting, write down some things that you have bought over the past 3 weeks where price was your main criteria. I'll give you 30 seconds to do that now. Now, if you're like any of the of my customers, or the clients that I deal with, you find that list is pretty short, because general, when we go and spend our money, we don't look at price alone. We want value for money, and we're prepared to pay for value. There's a little formula that says that value equals benefits minus cost. A lot of high street names, and I live quite in London when I'm there, I live quite close to Oxford Street. And you see some of the large stores doing, they always respond to market difficulties by having a sale. There's no evidence that cutting your price brings you any more business. If you're trying to copy Poundland or Aldi or Lidl, then you've got to have a whole business plan behind it. Just cutting your price is almost going to see you out of business, as it is seeing many companies out of business. Your objective is to try and create value in their minds rather than just get to cut your price. So try and avoid giving discounts. Price is always an objection, doesn't matter how much a product is, but you've really got to think about selling the value of what you're offering and not about cutting the prices. But it's what most people do, I have to tell you. Then the third thing is they fiddle with the ad budget. They think, well, the sales isn't coming in, we'll do some PR, we'll do some advertising. And you see a lot more ads starting to pop up from these people. And the problem with that is that you start to get a lot of inquiries from people who are never going to be prospects anyway. And you go and see them and you get more and more rejection. And I don't know about you, but there's only so much rejection that I can take in any marketplace. The alternative to that is they cut the ad budget. And the problem with that is if they're seen around the market up until the crisis, and advertising regularly, and suddenly they're not advertising anymore, people think they've died and gone away. So fiddling with the ad budget generally doesn't do anything for your business. There's an owner of a store chain in the United States, Sam Wanamaker, several years ago, that he said 50% of all the money I spend on advertising is wasted, but I don't know which 50%. And the fourth thing, which is what I was frequently told when I started selling copying machines at Xerox, is work harder, knock on more doors, see more people, and people wink at you and say it really is a numbers game. It's not really scientific at all. Problem with knocking on every door you can see, and we used to be told, when I was walking around Southwark in southeast London, walk down the street with your arm against the wall, and every time it goes in, there's a door, there's somebody you could go and sell to. That is a way of selling. It isn't the easiest way of selling. All you're going to end up doing is seeing all these people who are never going to be customers anyway. So avoid just telling your sales force to knock on doors. You should know what the type of prospects respond to you, and just a whole list of names and endless door knocking is going to do you no good at all. And believe me, I've tried it. So avoid these strategies, a little rider on the end, if you possibly can. So I can't hear what you're saying, but I've got some good news and some bad news for you. Which would you like the first? Okay, the bad news. The bad news is that according to estimates out of the States before this crisis even started, is that 16 in America, that is, about 16 million people employed in the sales business were going to sales profession, were going to lose their jobs over the next 3 years. And if you take that back over here to the UK, where we've got, what is it, 60 million people live, they reckon 2 million people who are sellers are going to lose their jobs in the next 3 years. Now that's the bad news. The good news is the remainder are going to be doing a very different job and will be paid a lot more, which is excellent. But a lot of people aren't going to cut it because they can never get away from the way they're selling now. And they've got to change that if you're going to succeed. Now, I call this the Helsinki story. A little while before Christmas, I was asked by a good friend of mine to go up to Helsinki to run a program for him, which I did. And as often happens, I was asked halfway through the week whether I could attend a breakfast the next morning as their guest where they were the hosts for the Helsinki Chamber of Commerce. And if they wouldn't mind that, that during the breakfast, to pay for my keep, that I would answer some questions from the audience as I was there. You know, they look good in front of their colleagues in the Helsinki Chamber of Commerce, and it would do me a lot of good as well. And usually what you get, and I'm quite used to doing this, I've done it in New York, I've done it in Australia and everywhere else, where you get, as the guest, you get asked to come in and just answer questions over an evening or a morning meeting. And the sort of questions you get asked are tweaky questions, like, you know, we run an international sales force. What happens if we take an order in Helsinki and it's installed in London, Japan, and New York? How do we reward the people in those local offices? Or we've got a sales engineering team which backs up the sales force. We want to reward them as well, but of course they're supporting the sales function. What can we do? All little tweaky conversations. But right at the end of the breakfast, somebody put his hand up at the back, and I said, "Well, it's the last question. What have you got to ask?" And he asked me a question which a few years ago would have been really stupid, and you'd say, "Oh no, not another one of these," you know, yawn, yawn. But looking at the way the market is now and the crisis that we are facing, it's a particularly apposite question. The question he asked was this one. He said, in this modern internet world where we've got a lot of problems, uncertainty piling up, what is a sales force for? What is the role of a sales force? So what I want you to do now, take about half a minute and just write down what you think your role is in these difficult market conditions with your product or your service. When you go in front of a customer, what role are you playing? What is your job? And I'll stop talking for a minute and just give you half a minute just to write something down. Right, well, I can't see what you've written down today, but I can tell you what the people in Helsinki wrote down. And I'll list them up here to ensure that my prospect has the right information at the right time to make a buying decision. Well, that's pretty reasonable, isn't it? That's what average, you know, the average task of a salesperson seems to be. Let's try another one now. To convince your customer to buy from you by showing you're better in some way, it differentiates you. Or to show you have something worthwhile that meets the customer needs. Yeah. Translating your company jargon into the customer's language. Yeah, I mean, that's quite reasonable. I've done that before now. To communicate to customers the value of your offering. That's reasonable as well. You notice something samey about all these particular roles that that salespeople said that was their job. They're all about communicating something. They're all about telling the customer something about your product or service. And that, in my mind, when I first started selling in 1969, that is the old style of selling. Right back then when I began, there was a famous saying you may have heard that you build a better mousetrap, the world will beat a path to your door. Now that was great in times when there weren't a lot of competing products. But now that one mousetrap has been replaced by thousands. Back then, you see, back in the olden days of selling, it was up to the seller to communicate the intrinsic value of the mousetrap or whatever he was selling. No good in making a big presentation because most customers were saying, well, no, all I want is dead mice cheap. These days, with the internet mainly, there are hundreds of thousands of similar looking mousetraps. And with the internet, I have to tell you that you all look the same. We all look the same. So going out and trying to communicate value to our customers is no longer the way to go. Customers, with seeing so many products and services in front of them, all of which look very similar, say all we really want is something cheaper. And I lose count of the number of times I've come out of banks and other financial institutions in Docklands and the City of London and indeed on Wall Street, having sat in on a sales session with a very good sales executive, but we come out all disgruntled because the customer kept on asking about the price. And they say to me, look, you know, I told you we were too expensive in our company. And I always say to them, no, you caused that to happen because you couldn't stop pitching. And yet most salespeople do that. If you continue doing it, you're selling in this way, you are going to lose, which is why I said earlier, a huge number of people are going to lose their job in the sales profession because they don't understand how things are changing. To communicate the intrinsic value of the mousetrap isn't it. The truth is, you see, that you are wasting your time trying to communicate value. You cannot describe value because the value proposition exists in the customer's head, not in what you tell him or her. You cannot communicate value. You can't communicate value. You can't describe it. You can't communicate it. Value only exists in your prospect's head. And it's very difficult to get in there because what your customer concludes during the dialogue is the only way to create value. So we've moved now from the way I was taught to sell all those years ago, where it was the demo and you show people what you've got, and the customer sits there, you know, to buy what you have. These days, they get so many similar messages that you look the same. And yet, if you sell in the way that I'm going to teach you, or I'm going to recommend that you sell, even if another competitor of yours has a product which is similar to yours and maybe the same price or even cheaper, if you sell in the way that I'm going to show you to do it, you will tend to be the chosen one rather than your competitor. Just looking down at this slide for a minute, you've got various sales methodologies, sales roles adopted by different people. Just look at those. Client ambassador, talking brochure, problem solver, order taker, problem finder, latest news bringer. And put those on that scale on the left-hand side in your mind. Where do you think the number 110 best type of sales role, according to buyers that we ask, fits against the number 1 or the 0 down the bottom? Which do people find the most interesting or persuasive sales approaches, and which are the ones which are least acceptable? Again, just look at this for 15 seconds. Where would you place those different styles on my scale to the left there? And each of those, the client ambassador is somebody who will sort problems out for the client, takes the client's side on difficult situations. Talking brochure is, as it suggests, just telling the customer what he could have learned from the brochure. Problem solver, very useful, fixing a problem the customer has identified. Order taker, you see a lot of those in the retail profession, just going around for their company and taking the orders. A problem finder, another useful role. And the latest news bringer, some people like to be kept up to date, and that's what the salesperson does. So let's have a quick look. And there's the order, according to buyers that we talk to. There's the order in which they place the different problems. Right at the top there is problem finder, even against problem solver there. I always think that's quite interesting. People really like the insight that you provide, if you can provide the insight, into finding a problem they didn't realize was there. But right at the bottom, the number 1 or 0 spot is talking brochure. And unfortunately, that is the role adopted, whatever they tell you. And as I say, I spend a lot of time in the field with salespeople. This is what they actually do. They yap and tell customers things that they could have got out of the brochure anyway. And if you talk to a buyer, they find that sales role the weakest of all. And yet it's what most people do. What customers value is insight. What they're always saying, I always say, is to have this up on my wall in my office. I always imagine the customer is saying, show me something I didn't already know about a problem I didn't realize I had, then show me the solution I hadn't anticipated. And just about every buyer I talk to says they have met salespeople who are able to do that, but they're very rare. And it's all about getting yourself properly prepared and knowing your product and knowing the sort of problems that you can fix. And it's a very interesting when you actually stop some people in some large organizations, when I get called in to help strategize a sale, that you ask them this question. It's a showstopper. What big problem do you fix for your customers? And they can't answer it. They will say, well, let me have a think about that for a moment. Yeah, this is what you have absolutely got to know. What you should ask yourself, therefore, and your sales team before you get going out on any prospect meeting, and I certainly make sure that I do this all the time, is this next meeting going to be so valuable and insightful for my prospect that after it, they feel they should really have paid me for my time? Have I made them think about sufficient things that no other salesperson has done before to make them think? And they might not always tell me this in the office the first time. And I always like to think of them as soon as I've gone, say, well, I didn't let him know this, but is this what we do? Blimey, I didn't know that. This is very interesting. We need to get him back in again, which is what I like. So what is it? What tool is it that we can use to create value rather than try and communicate it? Now, this is something based on some research, not done in America. We often think of sales things or things that happen in the States. This is something that some work done over 30 or 40 years ago. I think it was commissioned by Xerox, but it was actually done here at one of the UK universities. Because they wanted to know, Xerox wanted to know, and they used to have a system of selling there called PSS, Professional Selling Skills. But they wanted to know what actually it was that their top sales people were doing when they went out to sell. And it didn't matter whether it was a recession or good times or bad times, these same people always came through. They thought it might be that they were good closers, or good objection handlers, good demonstrators. What was it that they were doing that made them the top salespeople in any branch at any time? And the findings were so revolutionary at the time, a lot of the book publishers wouldn't publish the books about it because they thought it was just too simple. There's a lot of folklore out there, and if you ask open questions that can't be answered yes or no, they're the best types of questions to ask. And I've got to say to you, and that's exactly what I do, because that's why I was trained to do it. But he said there's no evidence that asking open questions brings you any more business, or they're great closers, or they're great objection handlers, or great demonstrators, or the very hard salespeople, like that film, what was it now? Glengarry Glen Ross, always be closing. That isn't it at all. What every seller has been searching for forever, what top sellers do that makes them different, the intergalactic secret of effective selling is, do you know what it was, any of you? Just spend a couple of seconds just writing down what they discovered that top sellers do all the time. They ask more questions. They ask more questions. That's all. That's the only thing they could identify in the whole of their the business interactions, was they ask more questions. It's rather like if I ask my wife, if I say, have you got a tissue? She doesn't give me a tissue. She says, what have you spilt? She lives in a world of questions, of which she should be in sales like me. But this is what top sellers do. But let's ask ourselves why. Why are questions so powerful? Well, look at this. An average seller on a timeline at the top there does an intro, a bit of investigation, asking questions, and then as quick as he can produces solutions. And all you end up with there is a lot more time with the customer raising objections. Top sellers, they've discovered, do an intro, and then they pre-plan for an awful lot more questions. Then they provide a solution, and they get a lot fewer objections. There's a Socratic method of selling, which I call the heart sell, not the heart sell. Top sellers are in no hurry whatsoever to show their solution. There's a story they tell about Socrates, who was approached by a young man to become a student. And Socrates didn't answer. He took him down to the river and put his head under the water and left him there for about 10 or 15 seconds. After 15 seconds, he was starting to struggle. And Socrates still kept his foot on his head. After 30 seconds, he dragged him out, bedraggled. And the boy said, what did you do that for? And he said, because I'm not going to take you on as a student until your need for knowledge is as great as your need was a moment ago. So the longer they spend in the hard sell, or in the hard sell arena, is what top salespeople do. They're in no hurry to get their solution out. The longer you can delay getting your solution out, the longer you can keep the investigation going, the more the build-up of desire to get your solution is with the client. So why are questions so powerful? Number one, you discover what's going on in your customer's head. That's right. But the second thing is even more powerful. I want you to listen to this, please. The reason that questions are so persuasive is that when somebody asks you a question, you cannot simultaneously think of anything else. It's like getting hold of them by the lapels and jerking them towards you. Even chatty conversational questions, it works with that. When a person is answering your question, they cannot simultaneously think of anything else. You must pre-prepare conversational questions about problems you know you can solve. You know you're thinking you're going to go out there by some divine inspiration and questions are going to come to your head. Questions don't just happen. The way I prepare questions still, and you can copy me if you like, take a sheet of A4 paper if you don't know this already. Put your features, your raw facts down one column, your advantages down the other, or benefits, or however you describe them, and the question that will come out of that. For example, you might know that, I'm a training company, that we train salespeople to cold call professionally. The advantage of that, you imagine the customer saying, yeah, well, so what? What gives them powerful tool for finding new clients fast and pressure-free. So the question I would actually ask the client in a very chatty conversational way would be, is it much of a worry for you to find enough new prospects? And I always use words like worry, concern, problem, because that's what they want to talk about. I'm not going to try and cheer them up too much. I want them to talk about the problems and worries and concerns. And they start to talk themselves into the issue. And another one, we run field coaching programs for sales organizations. The advantage is without a field coaching program, most sellers return to their old habits inside 30 days. So the question you'd ask face-to-face with the client, how concerned would you be if you to discover your classroom training was a waste of time, was wasting a lot of money? So step one, prepare questions about issues you know you can fix. Step two, prepare questions about the knock-on effects of not addressing problems you know you can fix. So the way you do that is you imagine that your customer is saying, you're right. Yeah, you're right about that question you just asked me, but it is a bit of an issue, but it's not worth the cost or hassle of fixing it. Consider, why would he be wrong if he was to say that to me? And from that, you can get your second type of question to build as you've heard the expression, build the pain. Agreed, but dismissed. Cold calling training might be useful, but it's another expense, and anyway, we're doing okay. Why would he be wrong? Latest surveys show that 80% of the available new business is currently going to 5% of sellers who know how to cold call. So the question would be, you mentioned the usefulness of cold calling, but would you be worried to discover that 80% of the available new business is being stolen from under your nose? And that's how I do it. And I still do it now. I can't help it. That's the way I learned. If you want a kind of an outline for a sales meeting, this works, you're still going to be able to do this with some people because people have got more problems now, more worries. The way you set a call up, or the way you conduct a call, was at the very beginning, just tell the customer, if you're talking to them on WhatsApp, or if because we can't go and see them at the moment, on the phone, the purpose of the telephone call, which they've agreed to, the process and the payoff. So you tell them, the reason I'd like to talk to you is that we might feel there might be a fit between your company and mine. In order to do that, rather than pitch at you, I'd like to ask you a few questions, and from these questions, it'll become very obvious to both of us whether I can help you or not. If I can, then I can stay and we'll have a longer talk. If not, I'll terminate the call. How does that sound? Then you ask step one questions about problems you know you can fix. Step two questions about the likely knock-on effects of addressing a particular problem. And these step two questions are like getting down to the 90% of the iceberg under the water. The step one questions show you the tip of the iceberg. Number two, make the customer think about the knock-on effects that he really doesn't want to think about, because that's what's costing him the money. It's only when you've done that and you keep the questioning going for as long as the customer wants to talk about it, you're not just waiting for your turn to talk, and you start introducing your solution with your proofs and demos, and then answer any queries. We use classic objection handling. But then, at the close and the next steps, and I'm going to talk about this for a minute, because less than 10% of meetings successfully close a sale. But equally, only less than 10% of the meeting result in an outright no. So what are we left with? We're left with 80% of what we call continuations. That's what the customer says, that's great, we'll let you know soon. And unfortunately, most of those are going to be people you never hear from again because they get distracted by other things, they lose a sense of urgency. So it's up to each of us to maintain this continuation and plan in advance instead. What that is, before you leave the office to go and see the customer or pick up the phone or talk to them on the computer, you want to pre-plan a minimum next step that will be acceptable to you that you're going to ask for during the meeting. You might be lucky and get more from it. What is the minimum you want to leave this meeting with before ending the meeting? You agree a place and time, and all the while the customer is agreeing to take that next step with you, you're still in control of the situation. As soon as they start to say, we'll let you know soon, you're starting to lose control. I like to be in control, or no, yes or no, I'm going to get the deal. I call that an advance. Now, finally, just to round off what I started saying this afternoon, I get a lot of emails sent to me, and they're mostly absolute rubbish and wouldn't convince me to buy a product from them. Here's one I slightly altered the other day, but it's based on a real email that somebody sent me. And this is very typical of the sort of emails that I get, people trying to get me to do business with them. This is what it said. As the CEO of Newbiz, I'm delighted to announce the opening of our new city office. We continue to offer superior software solutions to the whole range of city institutions and corporations. From bespoke CRM to simple call recording, we're able to meet the demands of our clients. If we can be of service to you in the coming months, please do not hesitate to contact us, blah, 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 blah. What's wrong with that note is, number one, I'm not interested in what they're excited or pleased to announce, and neither is anybody else. The weakest word in the English language is I, we, our, me. If you've got those in your headline of your email, you're wasting your time, and you're wasting your time being excited. The other thing at the very end there, apart from being too wordy and everything else, the other thing at the end is this famous phrase, do not hesitate to contact us. Human brain can't hold a negative thought, and it doesn't hear the do not hesitate. It just says, hesitate to contact us. You're giving an instruction, in fact, subliminally, for the person not to call you. On the other hand, a decent email would be something like this. What we call at the very beginning a headline, which is what we call a thank you. You know, getting to business is easy. And you notice in that top line there, we've got the word you, which is one of the most powerful words in the English language. Staying profitable is tough. I can agree with that, especially in these tough times. Yes, you and your staff, still using the word you, need to help you all you can get. That's why we created the Inner Game of Work seminar. It gives you all the tools you need to get right to the top of your market. Could you imagine what might happen if you called us now? Always try and end with a question. This type of email works. The top type generally doesn't. Similarly, as I just round off this, I get called a lot by salespeople, and they usually go something like, ring, ring. Oh, hello, am I speaking to Mr. Bob Etherington? Oh, Mr. Bob, and they start to call me by my first name. My name is Alex Smart of Electro Systems. How are you today, Bob? Oh, that's great. Bob, you probably haven't heard, but we offer many businesses in London a new online credit facility for taking payments. And we were wondering, Bob, something you'd never considered, Bob. You haven't, Bob? You think you're likely to, Bob? You're not sure. Well, anyway, it'd be a good idea for a brief meeting. Have you got your diary there, Bob? I could do, and so on and so on. Absolutely terrible cold calls, but something like that forms the majority of the cold calls that I get. More successful cold calls, really, if you're going to try and conduct these, and it's a great way of finding new customers, stop trying to be a smart ass or smart Alex, or beg your pardon, and really, really aim to not to try and engage the customer in some, it's quite obvious to me in that first one, the customer that the salesperson was trying to get me to agree to a meeting or something like that. All you should be doing at those early meetings is trying to establish trust. Be a perfectly reasonable person. And my way, I started doing this last year, and it's starting to work. So is that Mr. Smart? Oh, good, Mr. Smart. I'm sorry to call you. Apologize, because a sales meeting is always an interruption. My name is Bob Etherington. I wonder if you could help me. I'm trying to find the person in your organization who has to struggle with the challenge of securing new customers. That's you? Good, Mr. Smart. Would you be open to learning about new ways of making phone contacts, which is very effective and totally pressure-free? Send you an email first. Usually you get an objection at this point. No objection. I just say that's perfectly okay. I will send you something, and I'll maybe ring you in a couple of weeks. All I'm trying to do is make sure that if it remembers me, remembers I'm a totally reasonable person and not somebody just totally focused on getting an order. If they say yes or no, I would like to know about it, then I will, tell them a limited amount, and often say, well, would you like me to tell you how? I never tell them anything unless they say they'd like to hear about it. All I'm trying to do, and you can make up your own method, is appear to be a nice, reasonable person, and the whole pressure on either of us to feel that they really want the call to end. Normally when salespeople call me, all I'm trying to do is think of a reason to put the telephone down. This type of call is much easier on the eye and on the ear. So instead of if you're trying to crack the cold call code, 80% of the available new business goes to the 5% who know how to cold call, which is why I'm very keen on it. Indeed, it's why I wrote Cold Calling for Chickens 12 years ago. You have to admit nobody's waiting by the phone for your call. You're always an interruption. You need to remove the confrontational focus from must get the appointment, must get the sale. Instead, focus on establishing trust. Let the customer dictate the pace. Apologize for interruption. Tell the prospect nothing unless he says he'd like to know about it. Go with their objections. If they say send me something, say that's perfectly okay. Of course I will. Can't talk to you today. That's perfectly okay. I'll ring you in a couple of weeks. Don't try and overcome them. We've passed that now. Nobody wants to be sold like this. I said at the very end, the opening to this, that I give you the 2 golden secrets of selling, which are carefully hidden, but I'm sure you know them. Customers place 10 times more importance on the words that come out of their own mouths compared with anything that comes out of yours. So you're not just waiting for your turn to talk in selling, you're waiting. As soon as the customer starts to talk, then they're not listening to you anymore. And secondly, customers place more importance on things that your ability to provide the things they request than all the unrequested things that you freely offer them. That's what I wanted to say to you. I know it's been a huge run through an awful lot of material, but if you have any questions, I'll be very pleased to answer them. This is what I do for a living, and I've been doing it quite well for the last 40, 50 years. And if I can help you in any way, then I'll be delighted to do it. Thank you all for listening, and if you've got some questions, I'll be pleased to answer them.
Thanks so much, Bob. That's really, really helpful. And I've been busy writing down a ton of things that I need to do differently, and slightly embarrassed by the method of cold calling that I've been using already. But thank you so much for giving us that insight. We have had a few questions come through, but I would encourage a few more if there are any out there. If anyone's got maybe a situation or scenario that they want to share, then please do send that through. But the first one that came through was, don't customers object to being asked too many questions?
Right now, people want to tell you about their problems. They don't want to hear about your problems. They're not interested. They want to tell you about their problems. They want somebody to sit down and listen. There isn't even a profession now, I gather, around the city of London called a listener, not a psychologist, just somebody who will listen. So people do want to talk about their problems, and they don't mind, not just general questions, but let people at length tell you what's worrying them and what sort of issues they've got at the moment. But nobody's ever complained. They complain if they feel they're being interrogated, but if you are genuinely sympathetically listening to their questions, then you're usually okay. One lady I did a little tiny bit of work for last year. I rang up the other week and said, is everything okay? You're quite happy? She said, thank you so much. Although we didn't do much work with you, you're the very first person that has called me to make sure I'm all right. Thank you for thinking of me, which I thought was rather nice. The biggest reason, by the way, you lose customers is they forget about you. So you've got to, in times like this, you've got to stay in touch. That's your job.
Brilliant. That's reassuring. Thanks, Bob. The next one that came through is negotiation just a sophisticated form of selling?
Actually, it's the other way around. Negotiation is selling's poor cousin. Very often you're forced into a negotiation because you've messed up an otherwise perfectly simple sale. We do teach negotiating, but I prefer people to sell well first, and then we can go to negotiating afterwards.
Okay, so that's probably a session for another day, and maybe one that we could do when we're all together in the same room, but we'll keep an eye on that one for sure. Okay, here's a common one that comes up quite often. How often is too often to follow up with clients?
Right now, I do it. I wouldn't worry about if you do it about every month. I tend to do it every 4 or 5 weeks. Make sure you've got something to ask them, not just kind of, I'd like to follow up. Think of something that you could ask them that is something you missed the first time. Don't worry about chasing up people. Persistence is what counts, but do it in a very nice, gentlemanly way. And again, don't make it too obvious that you're looking for business. You know, you're just checking in them to make sure they're okay, because you know how difficult it is.
Okay, brilliant. And the next one that's come through is, are these techniques that you've shown us today viable or the same for approaching customers directly rather than business to business?
Retail market, I've done very little to do with the retail market, but they would actually work, because, you know, the main 80% of the reason we buy anything, carpets, coffee, desks and everything else, is to solve a problem, especially now. Very few people are interested in the big new exciting way to make a lot more profit and everything else. They're just people in survival mode. So you can use them. Very few people use the techniques. That's the problem. Well, not the problem. I mean, it's great for the rest of us, but most people go in, as I said, and they are talking brochures. And as you know, it doesn't matter who you are. Talking brochure salespeople are what send us to sleep. But it does mean preparation.
Yeah.
And you know, most people aren't bad at it. So most people haven't got poor products. That's not the reason you lose a sale. It's because you get outsold by somebody who does actually use these, and you know, is prepared in the early days to make some mistakes. And you will make the odd mistake, but it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. It shows you're doing something. You're doing something right. But talking brochure, unfortunately, most 80% of salespeople fall into the talking brochure hole. It doesn't help them at all.
Okay, fantastic. Someone's just asked if this is being recorded. It is. So Bob, if you're happy for us to share this recording so people can go back and use it before they approach their next customer, then we can do that.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Yeah, so we'll share this with everyone. I think that is the last question that's come through. So that really just leaves me to say thank you ever so much, Bob, for sharing your insights. You kindly alluded to the fact that you've been around for a little while and have got all of that knowledge and experience and passed it on to us. So that's fantastic. So thank you again, Bob. We've taken away some really key important points that I hope helps get people through the next few weeks and months ahead.
Could I just raise one thing? The telephone number, put in the free telephone number. Unfortunately, because I disconnected it before I came down to my domicile in southeast London, I switched off my free phone call number, and I haven't been able to get back up to London to turn it back on again. So if people want to make contact, you can either do it via my website, via my email, or they can. I put my mobile number on the last page of the slides. They can call me on that. So I don't mind on this occasion. I'm sorry, but I thought I'd be back up in London before now, but I've been away from there for 4 weeks. So what can I say?
No, that's not a problem. I'm sure lots of people will be getting in touch, and as I said, we'll share that those slides and the recording. Lots of nice messages coming through for you, Bob, saying thank you very much. So that just leaves me to let you know that we've got lots of events coming up online. What have we got starting off? Next Tuesday, we're launching our Young Professionals Network. So if you or anyone you know are students, apprentices, or recent graduates that are feeling a little bit in limbo, then we've got some motivational support webinars coming up. Our next business webinar is next Wednesday at 3 p.m, same time, and will be on strategies for effective marketing during the coronavirus with our marketing partners, Costello Communications. Next Thursday, we've also got something a bit different, a little bit of fun. We'll be doing virtual wine tasting. Sadly, we haven't invented anything to actually dispense wine, but do take a look at the invitation and see how that works with us. All of those details are in our recent newsletter, but if you haven't received that, then do drop me an email. So it's Sophie@Westminster Business Council. Then I'll make sure you're subscribed and notified. And please let us know if there's any specific types of support or webinar that you'd like to listen into. And the last thing from me is that Westminster Business Council has got some new membership offerings up on our website, so have a look at those and feel free to get in touch at any time. I'm sure I've just done exactly the wrong thing that Bob just told me not to do, but thanks everyone. Thanks everyone for listening in, and we'll look forward to welcoming you to another session soon. So thanks everyone and take care.
Thank you. Bye-bye.